Let's just get the drama out of the way. Saquon Barkley is going to be our number one running back. Brendan Albert is here. I am Adrian. Thank you. That's right. We're doing running backs now in our top 5 positional rankings. I mean, Saquon Barkley. Just how good is he? Because we've had some pretty good ones come out the last couple of years. Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette. Compared to those guys, how good is Saquon?
Take Saquon over all of that, guys.
Me too.
I would take him over all of them. I mean, I look at it here because, Gurley, Gurley might be my 2. I'd probably take Gurley second. And I think Zeke is maybe a little more talented than Gurley, but Zeke had all those off-the-field concerns coming out, and obviously they still showed up last year. And then Fournette, I'm just not completely confident in him that he's, A, going to be durable enough to hang up the physical pounding he takes and his ability to receive out of the backfield. Barkley, I heard a really good kind of summary on what type of player is he. He's the sun. You build your offense around him, and then we all rotate around the sun. And I was like, I know that's a really bold statement, but when you look at everything Saquon does, height, weight, speed, all the combine numbers, I get it. I think he really is, Adrian, leaps and bounds the best player.
Yeah, and when I watch him play, it's like Marshall Faulk reincarnated. The way that his jump cutting ability, what he can do out of the backfield. I mean, that's basically what separates him from Fournette and Gurley and Elliott is what he can do out of the backfield. But there are people out there that think he's pretty overrated. Why would people think that?
I mean, you can't teach stupid. I mean,
no, but there are seriously people out there that are like he's overrated. I don't get that argument. And then why they can't tell me.
I mean, when you're on top of the mountain, everyone likes to point fingers. I mean, that's really the truth. I mean, Saquon leaps and bounds is the best running back in this class. The one argument I will hear is the very good running back class. So let's say you're the Giants and you're sitting there at 2 and you're thinking, okay, yeah, Saquon's the best player, but you know what? We could take Josh Allen and then come back in the second round and get a guy like Sony Michel or Ronald Jones and still have a damn good quarterback and a good running back. Versus if you're the Giants and maybe you say, okay, we'll take Saquon. Well, now at 2, you're looking at maybe Mason Rudolph at best. Probably more like a guy like Luke Falk, Kyle Aletta, et cetera, guys like that in the second. So if you're not don't draft the running back second overall or top 5 overall, I'm okay with that as long as you're making the argument because the running back depth at the top of the second round is still going to be damn good this year.
Do you want a really good running back / potentially great running back, or do you want a Hall of Fame running back, even though you're drafting him top 5? I mean, he's going Hall of Fame. Just give him the jacket now. Give him his little plaque or whatever, the bust, whatever they call it. Give it to him because he's going kid.
I mean, at this rate, the only thing that would stop him would be a team. The unfortunate thing is that's a very real concern.
Yeah.
He could go somewhere and not get the best help around him,
Yeah, so let's kind of break down what he is as a player because he literally has everything in the bag. Talked about the agility and the jump cutting ability. He's also got some power. He's got some speed. I mean, he's chiseled out of stone. And then his pass catching ability, he can go out there and run routes if you wanted him to, just like Marshall Faulk always did. And you talked about the sun and everything revolving around it. As great as that offense was in St. Louis and the Rams, it all revolved around Marshall Faulk. I mean, he was the guy.
Same thing in the Chargers with LT. I think he's more like LT because I think he has more physicality than Marshall Faulk, which I think then becomes LaDainian Tomlinson. So, yeah. I mean, when Adrian, you talked about everything that he's good at, he's also can return kicks.
Yes,
I mean, that's a nice little additional bonus there too. The criticism that people have is maybe he doesn't do as great about north-south, doesn't always get into the trash and move piles and things like that. I could argue that, but I also could say, you know what? If you were the number 1 overall player coming out and you were playing in meaningless games towards the end of the year like Penn State wasn't a national championship, so unfortunately everything else is meaningless. It's easy to kind of say, maybe I don't, run it up inside. Maybe I bounce this one and get closer to the sidelines and kind of stay healthy. I mean, there's a reason Leonard Fournette didn't play in his bowl game, So if you're criticizing that, I understand why you would say that, but I think you also have to wonder, was he also not playing as physical because he was thinking about his future?
It's a good point. Never really thought of it that way. So that's good. All right. So I think this is where we kind of are going to differentiate. We'll see, because you got after Barkley, there's several guys. You got your Geisses and your Sony Michels and your Ronald Jones and Nick Chubbs and Royce Freeman. There's so many guys. It's a deep class. So who's your number two?
We actually haven't talked about this, Adrian. So I'm kind of curious about how we're going to differ. To me, it's Sony Michel. I mean, Sony Michel's a big playability. Yes, he doesn't have a ton of receptions out of the backfield, but you know what? None of these guys, except for Saquon in the draft, do. He's big. He's 5'11", 220. He's actually heavier than Darius Geis. Most people don't know that. He's 9 pounds heavier than Darius Geis. He ran a 4.54, 22 on the bench, which is 7 more reps than Darius Geis, so he's certainly physical. Great burst. If I'm negative, fumbles ability. Yeah, he does have a high fumble rate. I will say that's a very fair thing, but you know what? That's something I can teach. I can't necessarily teach his burst. I can't teach his vision. I think all of that thing's for Sony Michel. So to me, he's my second overall guy. But I would say if you ask me to put money down who's the second, I would probably say Gary Geis gets drafted second overall. But I like Sony Michel a ton. I would have him as my second running back. How about you?
Yeah, I was fighting with Geis, and I'm not going to say who my number three is just yet, but I kept going back and forth between these two guys. And then I thought to myself, well, Geis has more of a potential to be that feature back, to be a guy that can carry the load. So I have Geis as my number two. Even though I think you're a little bit down on Geis, if I remember correctly. We'll get to that when we get to your rankings when we go on. But I have Geis as my two. I think that the way that he can move piles, and I think he's also got some fluidity that he can kind of make some people miss too. So you look at a guy that can run with power and a guy that can also bounce to the outside if he wants to. Maybe not as good as say like a Ronald Jones in terms of his agility, but he has some of it. I'm curious to see if he can be a pass catcher in the NFL. He wasn't asked to do a lot of it at LSU, but when you did watch him catch the ball, he caught it with his hands. He seemed like a natural hands catcher, so I think he would be able to translate that to the NFL. So Darius Geis, I have him at number two because I think he's a guy that can get 20 to 25 carries a game. So that's what kind of differentiates him from, say, some other guys who I think would be better off in a committee. And you see the way the NFL is now. I mean, it's more of a committee approach than it was like even 10 years ago already. So Darius Geis is going to be my number two, and that's that. So who's your number three?
That's completely fair, Adrian, because Geis is my three. But I understand the argument you make, and the argument you make is why I think he actually will go before Sony Michel, because he's a guy who can take 20 and 25 carries. I'm not 100% confident that Michel can take 20, 25 carries, mostly because I haven't seen him. He was a committee guy at Georgia, so I wonder, is he a committee guy because his durability was a concern, fumbling was a concern that they didn't want to give him more carries? And I think that's fair because he's not getting as many carries as Geis and still has a lot of fumbles. So that's a fair concern. I will 100% agree with that there, Adrian. But Geis is my three. You're right. Power, physical, tough SOB. If you want a guy who's going to be mean between the tackles, a perfect fit for him is Detroit, because he walks in and becomes the bull in the china shop, and Detroit already has 2 scat backs out of the backfield, so he walks right in there. But he also fits exactly what the Baltimore Ravens have been for generations, since I was a kid. Watching a guy like Jamal Lewis, very, very similar physical power runner, but doesn't have the great burst. Yeah, he's got good speed, but his burst isn't there. It doesn't exactly accelerate quick enough for me.
Yeah.
I have him as my third guy overall. If you put money down, I'd probably say he goes second. He's probably the second running back drafted, but I like Sony Michel more than him.
Yeah. Okay. So for whatever reason, I thought you kind of disliked Geis a little bit, but I guess that's not true. All right. So my number three is Ronald Jones, and he to me is explosive on tape. And you watch him run and his jump cutting ability and the way that he doesn't lose speed. I mean, he'll cut and he's still got the acceleration after he cuts, so he doesn't lose speed at all. I like his vision. He can take anything to the house. So Ronald Jones is my number three. I know, we talked about this when we covered his film. He ran a 4.6 at the 40, so you're probably thinking, oh, man, he clearly not as fast as we thought he is on tape. But you said he had an injury. It was a hamstring. He pulled his hamstring, right? And then at his pro day, he was like 4 something. So to anybody wondering about his 4.6, there's your reason why. So Ronald Jones, he's my number 3. I don't know if anybody else is going to have him at number 3, but I do.
That's totally fair. I mean, you put his tape on, and his tape says he deserves to be a top 3 running back in the draft. You're 100% right there, Adrian. Home run threat. He was a track guy at USC, so his speed is certainly way better than that 4.65. And if you watch the 4.65, he pulled something, pulled up the hammy. So, yeah, totally fair there, Adrian. I get why you would say he's a 3. Great receiver out of the backfield, very much a scat back type of dude. His ability to hurt you on third down and really is a matchup nightmare the next level. He's currently my 4. I have him as my 4 because his frame is a bit of a concern for me, and I'm also a little worried about durability. Only 200 pounds as a back, and even when you look at him, it looks like he's pretty much – his frame is completely filled out, which is a bit of a concern for me. So I have him as my 4 because I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that can really carry the mail more than 15 times a game. Yep. So if he's not a guy I can say, hey, I get him the ball 15 times a game, then I'm a little worried about him. Also, his usage at USC is significantly higher than a guy like Sony Michel. So Sony Michel, while he was a back by committee, if you want to be negative Nancy, you could say, oh, well, he's a back by committee because he's not that much better than anyone else. Or if I want to be positive Paul, I could say, because he was a back by committee, I'm willing to bet his body is physically in better wear and tear shape than a guy like Ronald Jones, who took more of a beating in college.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if you remember the conversation we kind of had, like, I think a little bit more progressively now with the running backs, because with me, like, I was always the guy that's like, all right, I want the every down back. I want the bell cow. I want the guy that gets 20 to 25 carries a game. I've become a little bit more open to guys like Ronald Jones and Sony Michel and, you know, a guy that might only see it 10 to 15 times a game because the game is changing. You're seeing a more running back by committee kind of style. Running backs are seeing less and less carries each and every year. So I've become open. I mean, last year, like, I wasn't that big on Christian McCaffrey for this very reason. And even Alvin Kamara, like, I was wrong about him. A lot of people were wrong about him. And look what he is now. So, you know, my thought process kind of changed a little bit, and I like what I see on tape. And that's why I got Sony Michel as my number 4. Maybe in the past he wouldn't even be in my top 5. But Michel, you look at a guy like him, I mean, you said it. He's 9 pounds heavier than Geis. I mean, you wouldn't think this when you watch him because he's got some agility to him, and he's a guy that can make people miss. He's got the power, like we explained. I don't think I shouldn't say he doesn't have as much power as Geis, but I don't think he has the leg drive that Geis has. So I guess that's the way to kind of explain it there. Because I would say he's probably more powerful, but in terms of being able to drag I mean, we've seen Geis, like, we have clips on tape where he's dragging defenders from the 5-yard line and scoring touchdowns. So that's why I have him as, you know, again, number 2. But number 4 with Michel, that's who I got. So there you go.
I think that's totally fair, Adrian. Everything you just said is completely fair. Now, if we talk about Alvin Kamara, right, everyone was so in love with him. He got the ball maybe 15 to 17 times a game. He wasn't a guy who was getting the ball 25 times a game, and he was Rookie of the Year. Now, if we go back in time and we told teams he's explosive as he is, would he have been a first-round pick? Probably. I think he probably would have been. So to me, that's what I see in Sony Michel. So I get where you're coming from. I get your hey, I want to get a guy who wants to get the ball 20, 25 games, can carry the mail for my team. I get why you'd value a guy like Geis. But if you flip it, the way I'm looking at it is Kamara got the ball 15 to 18, maybe 20 times a game. Yeah. Maybe he had kick returns, things like that in there, and he was Rookie of the Year. I don't think that's a stretch to say Sony Michel can do that. And people always talk about, oh, well, Kamara was drafted so much later. But here's the deal, guys. If Kamara went to Cleveland, or if Kamara went to San Francisco, is he the Rookie of the Year? Probably not. It's a huge factor of the team he plays for. So we always talk about, oh, well, you can draft a running back late and they can be successful. Yeah, if your team is successful, not the running back. It's a combination of the both situations there. So I guess we get to our 5 guy now. This is an interesting one. And honestly, I'm pretty confident in 1 through 4. My 5, I really don't know. I'm not confident. I have Rashad Penny here. And I have Rashad Penny here because of his ability to receive the ball out of the backfield and do kick returns. I know there's guys like Royce Freeman. He's another name you hear. Nick Chubb's another guy, Adrian, you talked about. You can even talk about Mark Walton from Miami. All those guys are in that mix. But when I look at Rashad Penny, 5'11", 220, 4.46 in the 40, size, speed, certainly has that in spades. Ability to run the ball back on kick return is great. I have him as my 5 guy. If I'm negative, he runs so freaking tall. Even though he's 5'11", he runs like he's 6'3" standing straight up. So that's a big concern. But I think that's something you can work on and can improve.
That's funny that you have him at 5 because he's my 5, and I didn't think you would have him as your 5. But I'm scared to have him as my 5 because I've seen how Donnell Pumphrey has panned out in the NFL. It's always a great offensive line there at San Diego State. They run the ball a ton. I mean, we talked about how guys can be scheme friendly for quarterbacks. Well, San Diego State is a very scheme friendly system for running backs. But when I watch him, he's 220. He ran a 4.46. You can see the explosiveness. He's got some jump cutting ability. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to trust my eyes here. I'm going to trust my eyes. I hope I'm not wrong. These San Diego State guys, I don't want to, be wrong twice. Well, actually, I didn't really like Pumphrey last year, so that's a lie. But I'm hoping that you don't have another situation here where you have another Donnell Pumphrey. Obviously, they're not the same player. I mean, you have one guy that was like 5'9", 150 pounds. Rashad Penny is 220. But I'm going to trust my tape. So I kept going back between he and Nick Chubb as my number 5 guy.
I get that. I totally get that here. And you know what, Adrian, you're 100% right. He's in a very, very friendly offense, very, very old school power eye, run the power, run the power, run the power, get crazy, run counter. And so he's going to be a guy who's going to get the rock, and you're fair. If you want to talk about, hey, well, the guy last year wasn't any good, why should I think the guy next year is going to be better? I think his ceiling is just higher. I think his best football is ahead of him personally. I would probably have said Royce Freeman is my 5B and then Chubb, because Chubb has a lot of injury history. That would be a concern for me, if the two of them. Royce Freeman is a guy who took a physical beating at Oregon. His best football very much could be ahead of him, but I also could say, hey, this could be a guy who medically might be a concern for me. To me, Adrian, linebacker, quarterback, running back. Those are the 3 positions that I am going to trust my medical physician more than any other position. I'm going to say, hey, what flags do you have? Even if it's a yellow flag, I'm going to treat it with more caution because of the pounding these running backs are going to take in the next couple of years in the NFL.
Yeah. All right. So I kind of forgot to ask this question when we got to the quarterbacks, and I should have. But I kind of brought it up a little bit because I do like Kyle Lauletta. So do you have any sleepers at running back?
I like Mark Walton, and I like Akam Wadley from Iowa. I think both of these guys could be that Darren Sproles weapon out of the backfield, third down killers. Wadley, he was a guy who got hurt, so he's going to get drafted later because he didn't play much of the season at all. Probably a guy going to go 3rd, 4th round. Wadley, a guy probably going to go 4th, 5th round. He's a little bit later than you would like. But if you're drafting these guys for the third down capabilities, yeah, I think those are my 2 sleepers. Do you have any, Adrian?
Yeah, I like your Walton pick because that was going to be one of mine. I'll throw out this name, Kalen Ballage from Arizona State. Now, maybe some of that is biased because I watched like all the Senior Bowl and I thought he really impressed. But you look at some of the tape he had at Arizona State, really powerful north-south runner, physicality, runs downhill. So I like him. And the other guy is, well, he's not really a sleeper because he went to Auburn, but Kerryon Johnson, I like him a little bit too. So those would be my 2. I would ask who's overrated, but I don't know if there's anybody that is overrated in this class.
That's a tough one. Overrated. I might say Nick Chubb is overrated, and the reason I say that is I don't think he's a second-round running back, but I think that might be where he ends up going. I think Nick Chubb's closer to a 3 to 4. I would rather, wait on running back and get someone later, like a Bo Scarborough much later, than get, pay the price and get Nick Chubb in the second. So I would say Nick Chubb is overrated, Adrian, but it's only because of where I think he'll go, not because of his talent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess if you could say overrated, I guess you could say Bo Scarborough a little bit.
That's fair.
But
Now
that's
here,
like the only one that pops out to me. And the only reason why I say Bo Scarborough is it seems like a lot of these Alabama running backs don't really pan out in the NFL, So it's kind of like that scheme again. You
yeah.
don't have a great offensive line to run behind, and that's that. So Mark Ingram, he's kind of done better later on in his career. He kind of turned the corner, but he never really lived up to what he was supposed to be. And my God, what's his name?
Trent Richardson.
Trent Richardson. I mean, how can you forget about Trent Richardson? Well, I did forget about him because I couldn't even remember his name. But you look at a guy like Trent Richardson who had no vision whatsoever. I mean, you had a big gaping hole this way, and he runs into the pile this way. So Trent Richardson is a perfect example. Bo Scarborough, we'll see. I mean, you got another guy there. It's like a big, powerful running back. He's a north-south guy. But I could see him being a bust too. I mean, that's just been the trend with Alabama running backs.
And I think when we talk about bust guys, it's all about where they get drafted in the end of the day. I don't think if Bo goes in the 6th round, I think me and Age, 6th through 7th, I think me and Adrian would be like, yeah, we're okay with that. If Bo goes in the 4, that might be a little bit rich for Bo. Now, Adrian, let me give you some Vegas odds here because I got a couple here from the good old-fashioned William Hill. All right. Running backs drafted in the 1st round. The line is 1.5. How many go in the 1st round, Adrian?
I'm going to say 2 because if Geis is there at 32, I don't think the Eagles pass him.
Okay, that's fair. I would probably say 2 as well. If I'm the Eagles, I would take Sony Michel over him because I think he complements what Jay Ajayi isn't. But I see your point. Okay, so that's one. Another one here, Adrian. Running backs drafted in the 1st and 2nd round. The line is 5. Over under 5 running backs drafted in the 1st and 2nd round combined.
Man, I'm going to say push.
Right. Because essentially what we're saying is does Nick Chubb or Royce Freeman or Auburn's running back, I forget his name. Kerryon Johnson. Do any of those guys go in the 2? I don't think so. But I do think our guys that we rattled off are going in the top 2.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. This one I put $150 down on. I felt really confident. It's a layup. Player to be drafted first, Sony Michel or Nick Chubb?
Oh, Michel. Yeah.
No question. Odds weren't very good. It was minus 270 for Sony Michel, plus 320 or plus 230 for Nick Chubb. So the line wasn't very good, but I think that's a easy one. And then here's another one I thought was pretty easy, at least in my mind. Player to be drafted first, Rashad Penny or Ronald Jones?
Probably Ronald Jones.
Yeah, Ronald Jones was minus 300. Penny was plus 250. So, yeah, I would agree with you there, Adrian.
All right, so while you pull up your spreadsheet, and this is something that we forgot to do with the quarterbacks as well, but we'll figure out a way to tie it in at some point. I will say this in my thought process with Geis for the Eagles. You look at Jay Ajayi and you talk about complimenting him. Well, Jay Ajayi is a free agent at the end of the year, and the Eagles already are kind of lacking money when it comes to even next year. So, and you got to pay Carson Wentz down the line. So that's kind of your thought process with drafting a guy like Darius Geis. You got a guy on his rookie deal for 4 years. Ajayi, all of a sudden, you don't have to re-sign him. So that's kind of the thought process there.
I think that's totally fair. Adrian, you should be able to see my screen right now.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right. So what I kind of did here, guys, was, I threw my top 5. I threw my pros and cons of what I saw for each of them. And then I gave my draft range where I think they'll go. Now, you'll notice here my range doesn't match up with my order. I think Sony Michel's a better back than Darius Geis, but I think Darius Geis might go a little bit ahead of him, but not by much. I think Ronald Jones, if a team, for example, says, throw out the combine stuff, we just want to watch game film, you certainly can get enamored by Ronald Jones. So this is kind of my breakdown here. And then my favorite thing I got to talk about, pros for Saquon Barkley, football. He's very good at football. It's pretty straightforward with what Saquon can do and what Saquon can't do. Maybe his north and south ability, if I'm being really critical, but I think that's a bit of a farce.
Okay. I like this. I like that you do this, and this is perfect. I mean, this is exactly what I think the people would like. I wish we didn't have Penny both at 5, but I didn't think you were going to have Penny at 5. Oh man, that's crazy. Because we want some differentiation, but we did have some differentiation because you got Michelle at 2. Not a lot of people are going to put Sony Michelle at 2.
No, I think that's fair. I know I'm probably out on a limb a little bit there on that one. I'll take that. But you know what here? Penny, Freeman, Kerryon Johnson, Nick Chubb. If you want to make a case for all of those guys, I'd be okay with it. I can see all of those guys being the 5. The big reason I put Penny over them is ability to return kicks. So, when you're a running back or you're a skill player, I'm thinking about how can you help the team as many ways as possible. Ability to return kicks is something that those other backs didn't do. So I would take Penny over them, but I wouldn't take them by miles, put it that way.
Well, the other thing that pops out, too, is that 4.46 at 220.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn explosive. But like I kind of explained, I mean, I am concerned about, him being at San Diego State and, the scheme and everything is always wide open. So it's great. Like, you have huge holes in college, but are you going to have the vision to make something happen in the NFL?
Yeah, that's a fair point too, Adrian.
So there you go. All right. Anything else? Is that it?
That's it. We get receivers coming up next.
All right. That's Brendan Albert. I'm Adrian. Thank you. We're out. Peace.
Appreciate it.